We will also be joined by Chief Financial Officer Brian Brown to provide us with a DTSC budget update. We will then move, if we have time, to the sub-item on the Executive Officer report, followed by the Hazardous Waste Management report and 2025 Hazardous Waste Management Plan, which will be presented by Deputy Director Mandy Bain. So we're scheduled to end the day around noon, and that's a pretty hard cutoff because a couple of us have to run to a tour after this. So let's go ahead and start off with public forum, which was the item that was tabled from yesterday. This is an item where we invite members of the public to comment on items that are not on the agenda for this board's future consideration. Board staff here will record any action items and report back on these items at a future board meeting. Board staff will also share these items with DTSC leadership team. So Sheena, will you please facilitate this item?
Thank you, Chair Rakestraw. So the floor is now open for public forum for items not on the agenda. And as a reminder, you can always submit your comments and questions to us at besinfo@bes.dtsc.ca.gov. I will start with our in-person participants. Please raise your hand and I will call you up to the podium if you would like to comment at this time for public forum. Seeing none in person, Chair Rakestraw. For those of you joining us on Zoom, please raise your virtual hands if you would like to comment for public forum. I do see one hand raised for Parents Against SSFL. I'm sending you a request to unmute. You have 3 minutes.
Good morning. Nice to see everyone again for a quick turnaround from yesterday. I'm going to continue the discussion yesterday about the administrative record. I remember being informed that decisions on what can be submitted by appellants into the administrative record can be decided by the chair and vice chair without it being brought to the full board. My concern is that there was a request to bring CAC's documents to be decided by the full board, and that was rejected. And I am concerned about that process. I know yesterday I was informed after my comment, and I really appreciate you taking the time to respond to my concerns, that this process is something that could be changed. And I'm hoping that we can put on the agenda for a future meeting that issue, whether or not this board will vote to change the process for how appellants can submit requests for additions to the administrative record. I'm hoping, and I don't know how much this concern is shared or supported by other folks, but I'm hoping that this can become a much more transparent process so that things that are accepted or denied to be admitted to the record becomes more public facing, because again, the administrative record sets the frame for what can be addressed, what documents can be cited to during the hearing on the merits for these appeal cases. And I think it's really important and shouldn't be something that is just streamlined or pushed through in concerns of time. I think that was the main reasoning, was that, if you wait until the next hearing, then, it's dragging things out. But I think, people who are appealing on permits have already been waiting, sometimes years, for their issues to be addressed. And so what is another month or two? Maybe not everyone agrees with that, but I think it's really important that the hearings and what they're based upon is transparent. So I'm hoping that we can agendize this issue further and address it to make it more transparent and more fair. Thank you.
Thank you. Rebecca Overmeyer Velasquez, I'm sending you a request to unmute. You may go ahead.
Thank you. Good morning. So this is Rebecca Overmeyer Velasquez, Clean Air Coalition of North Whittier and Avocado Heights. And I want to echo what Jenny just argued. I think it it concerns us that we don't have all of the records that we know are out there and could support an appeal by the public. And this gets to a larger question about the extent to which the BES, and this is what I said in my comments yesterday, the extent to which the BES truly represents the public, and especially communities that are environmental justice communities, even more vulnerable to pollution and toxic emissions, and are overburdened by the cumulative impacts of toxins in our neighborhoods. And this is why you folks were created, is to provide us a space to have our issues heard in full, and seriously. And I have to say, honestly, I didn't see that happening yesterday in the meeting. There were lots of questions for the BES Council and even EcoBat's Council, and not a single question or comment or clarification was asked of us. And I thought there was ample opportunity to have a discussion about the issues that were raised. There's significant issues about the stay and the extent to which staying only parts of the permit is in some ways really predetermining the decision about the appeal. You don't want that perception out there that, the way you make decisions now are in some way putting your thumb on the scale of the decision to come yet into the future. So I think that's important. It's important to show, at the very least, that you are taking into consideration everyone's perspectives, and I would say again, and especially the community's perspectives that you were set up to hear. The questions were limited to only the council, BES council. The changes that were requested, were not just grammatical changes; they were substantial. And because they got to the argument that was made in the initial order. So these are important considerations. I hope you all take this job seriously and really have robust discussion of the issues. I didn't see that happening yesterday either. I'm concerned about how much this matters to all of you, because it matters a lot to us. Thank you very much.
Thank you. McKee, I'm sending you a request to unmute. You may go ahead.
Hi, this is Duncan McKee. I was there yesterday. I echo what Rebecca said. You might want to talk to some of the people who actually know more about the facility than DTSC permitting and engineers and other people working on it. There were a couple of inaccurate pieces of information that were given to the board. There seems to be some confusion about the difference between the stormwater treatment facility and the wastewater treatment facility, which receives hazardous waste and supposedly treats it prior to going down the sewer as industrial wastewater discharges. And by the way, they're not testing for a lot of the really poisonous things going down that sewer, like the VOCs and benzene and other things that the wet scrubbers are scrubbing out and conveying there. So that was really, you need factual information to make good decisions. I never heard the question answered, could they have made these upgrades without this permit? Yes, they could have. They've had 20, 30 years to do a bunch of these upgrades, and somehow this permit hinges on that. And another thing that is a big complaint, this is a question to the board since you supposedly take questions. Why was Michael McKee's public comments discounted and the questions in there not answered? Because some of the things that you're saying weren't exhausted actually were brought up and exhausted. And you need to also shed some light on the apparent confusion. I mean, I noticed that Andrews uh, seems to have a handle on this, the difference between a matter, an issue, and an element. Okay. So, yeah, I don't know. The other thing I'd actually like to bring up, since this certain conditions of the 2025 permit have been unstayed, then what about the hazardous waste management units that aren't listed in there? Is Quomeco still going to be able to use those? Are your enforcement people going to go out and see if they're using them and make them stop using them and make them do a proper closure on it? So that's just a few things. There's a bunch more, but I'll leave it at that. Thank you for the time and appreciate the work that you're doing and hope we can do a better job moving into the future.
Thank you. Last call for public forum. For those on Zoom, please raise your virtual hands. Seeing no additional hands raised, Spanish interpreters, please let me know if there are any comments in the Spanish room. No comments in the Spanish room. Chair Rakestraw, that concludes this public forum.
Thank you very much, Hina, and thank you very much to the public commenters. We've taken down your concerns and really appreciate those concerns, and know that this is not the only forum to have these types of discussions. So I think I can speak for many of the board members that they're happy to meet and discuss various issues, so long as we avoid any of the ex parte communications related to a specific matter. I think that's the balance that we as board members have to deal with. But kind of more general policy concerns, always happy to discuss. So I won't respond substantively to any of the comments, but know that we take them very seriously. Okay, so that concludes public forum, which was the first item on our agenda. We'll now move to Director Butler's leadership report. And so I'd like to go ahead and invite Director Butler to join us at the podium, and she will also be joined, as I mentioned, by the Chief Financial Officer, Brian Brown, at the appropriate point. So, Director Butler, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair Rakestraw. Good morning, honorable members of the board. Nice to be here this morning with you all. I'm going to go over some department updates, recap our director priority progress to date, in anticipation of a more comprehensive, robust update next July or next month in July. And I also have a brief presentation on metal shredders, which is a quite complex topic. So if we want to dive in deeper, we can always do that at a future board meeting or briefings. And then I'll hand it over to our CFO. So I'd like to start by highlighting DTSC's role, responsibilities in emergency response. This is a topic that has come to these meetings before. And actually at the end of last fiscal year, in the recap of our accomplishments, challenges, this was a topic that I raised to highlight how DTSC does engage frequently in emergency responses. And it can be a pain point for the department in terms of having to direct resources to respond immediately to responses. It, of course, is a pain point for our communities we serve. They are hugely impacted by these emergencies, their health, their livelihood, their experiences in the community, the environment they live in. And there were quite a few emergencies since we last met. I want to touch on two. And first, the Sandy fire up in Ventura County. It was encroaching very close to the Santa Susana Field Lab site. And This prompted our team to work closely with the local and state and federal entities all responding to this fire. Our site mitigation deputy director, Than Berg, immediately directed the responsible parties, Boeing, the Department of Energy, and NASA, to deploy air monitoring proactively before the fire could have had the chance to reach the site, so that we would have data on baseline measurements, because we understood and we heard directly in real time from community leaders their concerns about radiological materials in the fire potentially reaching the community. So it was critical to us to have the data, and I am very thankful to DOE deployed 2 teams from its Las Vegas and Livermore locations, and deployed air monitors same day that we directed them to do that. And so, thankfully the fire did not reach the Santa Susana Field Lab, but we were prepared in this instance. And we were prepared because of our experience dealing with previous fires on this site, because of, I believe, our more robust, resilient emergency response team as it stands now. And so that was a near miss for us at the Santa Susana Field Lab site. And that's a picture of the air monitor there. The second response I want to highlight is the GKN aerospace incident just a few miles from this meeting room in late May. As many of you are aware, because it made national news, this aerospace plant called GKN reported an overheating chemical tank that caused and necessitated large-scale evacuations. The chemical tank contained 7,000 gallons of methyl methacrylate, known as MMA, and Cal OES mission-tasked DTSC as one of many partners in this response to provide technical support, assistance from our hazardous waste management experts to advise Orange County, work closely with the county to ensure proper and safe management of hazardous waste removal disposal. So now that we are in the environmental recovery phase of this response, and fortunately the very serious threat was mitigated, now DTSC is continuing to be on the ground monitoring the progress for recovery efforts here and providing technical guidance to the county. So we'll continue to do that, overseeing management of hazardous waste, including proper manifesting, transport, and classification. Additionally, we heard from commenters yesterday about the Boyle Heights fire that is in real time impacting folks. And there was an oil spill in East Los Angeles just about a week and a half ago. So these situations, they continue to impact our communities that we serve. And we at DTSC will continue to work closely with Cal EPA so that we can ensure our emergency response team is prepared, has the resources. Right now, as way of background, our emergency response team is a small but mighty team of about a dozen folks. And we typically contract out work as well to help force multiply our teams when necessitated. And of course, last year, we spent a lot of time responding to the Eaton and Palisades fires, and our emergency team was embedded in the US EPA response for that debris removal. So we'll continue to stand at the ready to assist our local, state, federal partners in these emergencies, and wanted you all to be aware that that is an area where we have a strong foundation, but I do see opportunities for further strengthening. Moving on to some more celebratory news, our Cleanup in Vulnerable Communities initiative, known as the Equitable Community Revitalization Grant, featured 2 events since we last met. And this is the program that helps transforms contaminated lands into beneficial community uses. So on the left here, we actually had a flurry of events in the Bay Area. These are two of them. On the left, we have an affordable housing project that brought 75 homes, including homes for veterans, to Oakland. And then on the right, Flickerbird Homes was quite a novel supportive housing, health, medical, dental center, along with the affordable housing, really lifting up the culture of Native Americans in the area. And it was just wonderful to hear how the needs assessment was done in that community. It really drove the vision to meet the community needs. And we were honored at DTSC to have a role in both of these projects that are truly reversing environmental injustices in this area. Switching gears to Safer Consumer Products Program. As way of background, Safer Consumer Products Program has spent the last 3 years intentionally expanding its research, strengthening its foundation to gear itself towards some of these actions I'm going to be talking about, which are all based on rigorous scientific evaluation. There has been some frustration in how this program in the past has seemed slow-paced. And now that we have this foundation, our processes, our staff, all trained up and kind of getting into this groove, our investment is now paying off. So we've steadily grown the number of initiated and adopted priority products each year. And in this current fiscal year that we're coming to a close now, fiscal year 25-26, Safer Consumer Products exceeded the target number of 5 priority products either being initiated or adopted. So just in the past couple of months, 4 SCP regulations have been noticed or approved. The last bullet here, cleaning products containing hydrofluoric acid, is notable. This is using a newer authority that we have granted through Senate Bill 502. So SCP initiated rulemaking to list cleaning products that contain hydrofluoric acid as a priority product with a product sales prohibition. So this, because of the seriousness of the chemicals in these products, this is an instance that warrants us going straight to prohibiting the sales of the product. The priority product covers cleaning products that include some rust removers, metal cleaning, brightening agents, wheel cleaners. This exposure to this chemical has the potential to cause severe and permanent injuries, including death. So given the severity of this, SCP is proposing to bypass the alternatives analysis. This is expediting our regulatory process for a chemical product combination that warrants it. Microplastics is the second rulemaking I'd like to highlight. Microplastics as a candidate chemical, which is the first step in our regulatory process to evaluating what priority product chemical combinations may be regulated in the future. After extensive engagement with interested parties on this topic, ultimately the rulemaking was finalized. The rulemaking in and of itself, like I said, does not have regulatory obligations, but it does now allow our program to scientifically, thoughtfully evaluate and propose consumer products that contain or generate microplastics for regulation in the future. Now I have a couple slides on permitting topics. So I acknowledge, and to your comments earlier, Chair Rakestraw, yesterday's hearing reflects the seriousness in which Californians view hazardous waste permitting and the impacts of these permitting decisions on the communities we serve, on people's lives. And this is why at DTSC, our permitting decisions are developed through extensive technical review, through carefully considering public comments, through comprehensive legal review, and ultimately the independent oversight of this board. Now, a key piece to the permitting process that we are now implementing through proposed regulations as mandated by the legislature, Senate Bill 673. These are long overdue. In 2018 is when we were mandated to do this. We started the formal rulemaking process last fall. We held a 45-day public comment period at the turn of the calendar year from November to January. And we actually extended that public comment period through to February for a total of 74 days. We held a couple public hearings, and this was after rolling out the informational sheets at meetings, board meetings, to walk through those and the approach. So after reviewing the public comments at this point in the process, DTSC is proposing some revisions to the regulations. And last week we initiated a 15-day public comment period. The proposed revisions clarify some of the permit requirements and the effective dates, updates community engagement and analysis timelines, because again, these regulations are expanding, creating more opportunities for community engagement earlier in the process so that they can better inform the outcome at the end of a permitting process. The revisions require community vulnerability assessment for all applicants. The original proposal did not. It was after a screening was done. So this will be a more robust requirement for all applications to include that community vulnerability assessment. And it will increase transparency through clear criteria that define when permit restrictions and denial is occurring. So this will limit the department's discretion in that decision making by providing more transparency. And that's an important trade-off for public accountability that the department stands behind. So again, we initiated this 15-day public comment period. I encourage the public to submit comments at this point on the revised regulations. It is a priority for the department to move these regulations forward so we do have clearer, more transparent criteria for our permits. There are some final permit decisions that have just happened or are happening. So last Friday, we made the final permit decision, released the decision for the Clean Harbors Button Willow hazardous waste landfill. That was closing out a very long continued permit, and it will require upgrades, necessary upgrades to the infrastructure for the treatment equipment at that landfill. There's also a couple post-closure permits here, one for TFX Aviation, and this decision was issued last week as well. So this is a post-closure permit for a civilian and military aircraft facility in Ventura County. And an upcoming final permit decision is for a portion of the Tesoro Carson refinery. So we don't permit refineries as a whole. DTSC has purview for very specific units at refineries. And in this case, at the Tesoro Carson facility, this is a post-closure permit for specified units that require, they have 2 retention basins, and these are used to manage non-hazardous processed water or rainwater during emergencies. But prior to the closure, the 2 retention basins were used for emergency management of stormwater and commingled with processed water. And so that's why they're being managed as hazardous waste units for this post-closure permit. We have a number of projected upcoming draft permit decisions. I won't go into detail, but we talked about the solar turbines facility in San Diego, a post-closure permit. The next 2, Crosby and Overton and Ramos Environmental, those are treatment facilities, largely for oily water, solvents. And then the last one, Acme, is a landfill, a post-closure permit for a landfill. So these permits, we continue to stay on top of timelines for issuing these permits so that we do not have a backlog of continued permits accruing. And thankfully, we have the legislative changes that now help us meet those deadlines because it requires facilities to submit applications earlier. So we're going to stay on top of that to make sure that there's no backlog that accrues. But more importantly than the timeliness of permits and the restrictions that come with issuing those for facilities is DTSC's enforcement of the permits and our enforcement priority that drives the oversight, the continuous inspections, the corrective action. That's where the rubber meets the road. And that's how DTSC stays accountable to its mandate, is the enforcement piece. Which segues perfectly into my first priority, enforcement under the director's priorities. So in July, you'll be receiving a report that recaps the status of all of the deliverables under the director priorities. I'll highlight just a couple here that I am proud of our team for establishing an enforcement training program. We've always had enforcement training, but this is more systematic. It is updated. It is reflective of the current values and principles, equity principles of the department. And EERD, our enforcement division, they developed this training content closely with our training office. And there were 4 additional courses that were developed for a total of 6 trainings. So it's a package of trainings that's being rolled out to staff. And our site mitigation and restoration program finalized its enforcement policy. So yes, this is an internal document. Of course, it can be shared publicly, but I'm being transparent about our policy development, the administrative tools we have internally to make sure all of our staff are singing from the same sheet of music, right? And these types of policies are instrumental in not only being consistent now, but also developing our workforce, succession planning. All of this training and development is really key to our long-term success. So the next is the environmental justice trainings that our Office of Environmental Equity team has worked extensively to create. We've received, I think, feedback from some of you, from interested parties on these trainings. We even feature some of the community leaders and videos of them in the training, speaking firsthand to the importance of environmental justice and what it means to them. And so the first module, titled Introduction to Environmental Justice, is scheduled to go live with our teams this summer. It's completed. Now we're just in the rollout phase. And then module 2 and 3 have also been developed and will be rolled out sequentially. So here's the vision for all 5 modules, and we'll continue to work on these through the end of this calendar year. Safer Consumer Products Priority Work Plan was a deliverable under the Director Priorities. This is issued every 3 years. It's really the guidepost for what is the program going to focus on over those 3 years. It has extensive input from our Green Ribbon Science panel, from our internal, external experts. They come together and land on the work plan. So we're on track to releasing this plan this fall. And again, this will help focus our work on priority categories. And so looking forward to rolling that out and sharing it with you all. And then there will be a couple of the director priorities that roll into the next year. I anticipate these two in particular will be completed by the end of the calendar year. We are in the middle of wrapping them up. The public participation manual, which I know the board has had a lot of interest in, is continuing to be revised. And we will have a polished version of the revisions later this summer. And our Office of Environmental Equity will be sharing a version of this draft with focus groups, select advisory groups, so that we can get some external feedback. And we do plan to include the Environmental Justice Advisory Council in this process, as well as the board's Environmental Justice Subcommittee to help guide us in finalizing that manual. And then second is an endeavor that personally I'm very passionate about, the ability to fingerprint, attribute lead in soil. It's critical to our enforcement efforts, because if we don't know where the lead's coming from, we cannot hold a responsible party accountable, right? And we have worked extensively over the past year with the United States Geological Survey. So USGS is an incredible partner on this effort to study lead attribution and come up with a model that we can apply to our sites to help us attribute lead. So I recently met with Dr. Anka Mueller-Solger, who is the director of the Center for California Water Science at USGS. She is equally invested in this project. It mostly has come to a conclusion. We're in the final steps of peer review now, and we anticipate releasing this report either at the end of this calendar year or the beginning of 2027, which is very exciting for us because we desperately need this scientific ability to attribute lead for different purposes across the department. Hey, going into metal shredders. So I'll provide a brief background, although there's quite an extensive history here. So in a nutshell, these metal shredder facilities are facilities that use a shredding technique to process end-of-life vehicles, appliances, other sources of scrap metal. And this scrap metal, because it's shredded all together with, the car parts and the refrigerator parts, other than the metal, it does contain glass, fiber, rubber, other materials that are found in these cars and appliances. And so because scrap metal contains regulated hazardous constituents, it can cause metal shredder waste to show hazardous waste characteristics. And DTSC published a report to this effect in 2021 that documented the sampling, the results of the hazardous waste constituents in the shredder aggregate that comes out after the shredding process. But the long history is that in the late 80s, the Department of Health Services, before there was a DTSC, determined that metal treatment technologies used at these facilities could lower the soluble concentrations of the waste. So therefore, it would minimize the threat to public health, to the environment, by that treatment process that was being carried on site. So the Health Services Department at that time granted 7 metal shredding facilities non-hazardous waste classification and issued what is known as an F letter. These classifications can be found in the California Code of Regulations, and ultimately they did allow the treatment at metal shredders waste to be handled, transported, and disposed of as non-hazardous waste in Class 3 landfills. DTSC implemented OPP 88-6, and this allows shredders to process the shredded output without the need for a permit. Since then, like I said, DTSC conducted the study in 2021. We reevaluated the constituents in the waste, and we are involved in a lot of litigation around this question of what is hazardous waste and at what point in the process does it become hazardous waste. That aside, we have prioritized enforcement of offsite impacts because we clearly, undeniably have the authority to enforce releases of hazardous waste when the metal shredders emit hazardous waste offsite. So in large part, that has been our focus from an enforcement standpoint to address the threats that are posed to communities surrounding the metal shredders, because the metal shredder fluff that kind of looks like dryer lint does contain lead, other metals that are harmful to folks when they come in contact with this on the sidewalks. They could track it in on their shoes. It is a serious public health problem. So we have been very laser focused on the enforcement piece. And as evidence of that, Radius Recycling is a facility in Oakland, had a number of fires over the last few years. And DTSC issued violations for not just the fires, but for other violations of hazardous waste law. And we reached this $1.5 million settlement. Requirements of the settlement include funding several different projects that will benefit the local Oakland community. The facility is required to upgrade its fire prevention system and make improvements for how it manages hazardous waste. So fires at these facilities are unacceptable. When they have happened, we hear from local residents the exacerbated asthma, the impacts to air quality, the respiratory problems that ensue. And so there's technologies, there's ways these can be prevented. And now the facility has infrared imaging on every pile, physical person monitors as well as technology, right? Using both technology and people to monitor actively. So that vigilance, that oversight of environmental monitoring is now being required as a result of that settlement. And in large part, I think part of the ecosystem for a successful enforcement action for information that the department receives on complaints related to different facilities, I credit the community. I credit the community leaders that really lift up the issues that the community is having around facilities. And in this case, the West Oakland Environmental Indicators Project is the local nonprofit group that we've been working with for some time and is part of a collaborative multi-agencies, including local with the Bay Area, state, our partners at the Water Board and Cal EPA, and US EPA at the federal level are all collaborating directly with the community organization. And the company is also has a seat at the table to provide real-time updates, information during our collaborative meetings. So I attended the collaborative meeting in May 2026. That was our 5th quarterly meeting. So it's been a little bit over a year now where we've been meeting, and we share information on regulatory actions. Radius presented updates on measures it's taking to manage the environmental issues. And there's several work groups now that have been formed to look more closely at best practices for metal shredding, community reporting, and environmental health risks. And so these subgroups report back every collaborative meeting. Again, this is an excellent model for a multi-agency collaborative approach to really make progress on addressing environmental problems. Because there's many times where the local community will bring problems that were not on our radar. And then we have an opportunity to address it ourselves if it's in our purview, or make a referral to a sister agency. All right, the last topic is the metal shredder fee. Assembly Bill 2851 requires DTSC to adopt emergency regulations to implement this new fee for metal shredding facilities. The annual fee covers DTSC's costs to implement this bill. That will include a fence line monitoring component and will include monitoring for that light fibrous material, the LFM, around the facilities. So in determining the annual fee, we evaluated our workload data for the last year roughly at the 10 metal shredding facilities. And then we promulgated these regulations on June 5th. And here's the fees that amounted for the small and large facilities that they will have to start paying this next fiscal year. And we did separate the fee for small versus large, depending on their activities. So I recognize this is a lot of information on this topic, but happy to provide follow-up discussions or briefings as requested. And now I'll hand it off to Brian Brown, our Chief Fiscal Officer.
Hey, good morning, board members. It's a pleasure to be in front of you this morning. My name is Brian Brown. I'm the Chief Financial Officer for DTSC, and I've been asked to give you a brief update on the development of the 2026-27 Budget Act. If you go next slide, please. So just as a bit of reminder, how we got to where we are currently, the development of the annual Budget Act begins in January of each year when the governor releases his proposed budget for legislative consideration. And in this year's initial budget, the governor proposed 11 different proposals for DTSC. I won't go through those. We went through those in one of your earlier board meetings this spring. But as part of the normal budget development cycle, the governor made some additional proposals this spring in April and May. And I'm going to go over each of those on the next slide. In terms of where we stand now, stay on that. Thank you. In terms of where we stand now, the Senate and the Assembly, I'm happy to report both houses have adopted all of DTSC's budget proposals, both those from January as well as the new ones that were proposed this spring. That said, the Budget Act is not final yet. We do still have to wait for a final Budget Act negotiated between the legislature and signed by the governor. Hopefully that will occur over the next few days, with the new fiscal year starting just in a few days on July 1st. Okay, now next slide, please. So what were the new budget proposals put forward by the governor this spring? There were 4 of them, and I'll go over each one at a high level. Happy to take questions on any of them later as well. So the first is related to our oversight of the Exide facility. So there's not related to the cleanup at residential properties surrounding Exide, but our actual oversight of the Exide facility. So the demolition and cleanup of the property itself. And so DTSC has been involved in that oversight for years. But the purpose of this particular budget proposal is that the positions that we had been authorized for this oversight work were where they were limited term positions and scheduled to expire at the end of the current fiscal year. So this proposal allows us to have ongoing positions to maintain that work over the coming years as additional cleanup activities will need to occur. The second spring proposal that we had is related to metal shredder facility oversight, and this very much aligns with the recent regulation that was just adopted as discussed by the director. So as a bit of background, DTSC had received 21 positions for metal shredder oversight in the 2022 Budget Act. Those positions, though, however, we needed to kind of realign them with the new authority that we have under AB 2851 and the new fee that was created under the regulation recently adopted. So technically what we're doing is we are shifting 5 positions, about $2 million from our existing accounts over to the new metal shredder facilities account. That is the account that will be funded by the new fee on metal shredder facilities. We're maintaining 6 positions within our current hazardous waste control account. And then we are actually cutting 5 of those existing positions that were previously provided. And the reason for that is the initial proposal we had a few years ago anticipated that we would be doing permitting of metal shredder facilities. Since that activity is not currently occurring, we're able to reduce those positions. And then the last 2 budget proposals you see on the list here are both technical fund shifts. And so what that means is our total authority at DTSC, our total spending authority is unchanged, but the funds from which some of those activities are supported is changing. So the first of those is we are now officially creating the hazardous waste facilities account. This was envisioned in SB 158, the DTSC fee and governance reform bill, but it's taken us a couple of years to identify exactly the right amount of money that we need to put into that fund. And so it's been operating as a sub-account of HWCA, the control account, for the last several years. So we're now formally establishing HWFA, and we're shifting almost $8 million from the control account to the new hazardous waste facilities account. And then the last proposal here is one that was proposed by the administration to help achieve statewide general fund savings to address the statewide projected ongoing shortfall or structural deficit. So specifically, DTSC has had about $4 million from the general fund in recent years to support some of our emergency response activities. Those costs, again, we're going to maintain the same total amount of funding, but going forward, it'll be funded from the Toxic Substances Control Account, TSCA, rather than from the general fund. Next slide, please. So I want to conclude by just in recognition that over the next couple of months, the board is going to be engaging in your annual rate setting activities. And so now with the budget almost enacted, I wanted to just give you some preliminary information, at least on the budgeted expenditure levels for next year based on all of the budget proposals that were proposed by the governor and appear to be likely to be approved in the final budget act. And just to preface too, we will go through all this in some more detail in the upcoming board meetings when the board is hearing seeing the fund condition statements and seeing some of the different fee scenarios that will help your fee subcommittee develop. But just in aggregate, you can see here on the slide that all of the budget proposals put forward by the governor and likely to be approved by the legislature increase TSCA appropriation authority by about $15 million. Most of that is tied to 3 of the proposals. So about $4 million of that is tied to the shift of emergency response activities from general fund to TSCA, as I just described. And then another almost $4 million is associated with one of our January proposals, which has to do with the funding we spend on the remediation and maintenance and operations activities at our state and federal orphan sites. So our costs there are projected to increase by almost $4 million. And there's about $3 million in one of our January proposals associated with implementing recent legislation tied to safer consumer products. So those are the main factors impacting the projected appropriation increases in TSCA. Now for HWCA and HWFA, the story's a little bit more complicated here because, again, HWFA has operated as a sub-account of HWCA in recent years. But what you can see here is an aggregate, all of our proposals are actually a reduction in total expenditure levels in those 2 funds by almost $800,000. And the reason that it's a reduction is largely associated with the metal shredder proposal. So again, we'll be actually reducing some of our positions associated with metal shredder oversight, and then we will be shifting some of our costs from HWCA to this new metal shredder facility to count. So in aggregate, those activities are going to reduce total appropriation levels for HWCA by about $4 million. That is then offset by some of our BCPs or budget proposals, largely in January, that will increase our total cost by about $3 million. So on net, it's a reduction of about $800,000. Now, with that, I do want to just remind the board that certainly our appropriation levels and the change in the appropriation levels is a really important factor in determining what future fee rates will need to be and how they might need to change from the current fee rates. However, they're certainly not the only factors. And so, again, we'll go through all of this more in the next couple of months. But keep in mind, of course, that the Budget Act is not yet final. It's always possible there could be some late changes. And one of the things that we are actually monitoring closely is resolution of the vacancy reductions from the 2024-25 fiscal year. You may recall that there were statewide budget reductions in that Budget Act, including a reduction of 112 positions to DTSC. Effectively, what happened is the legislature stepped in and said for DTSC and a couple of other departments that they wanted more time to evaluate those reductions to see if they concurred, and we're still waiting the outcome of that review. I anticipate that we will have answers in the coming week with the final Budget Act, but if it is in fact the case that some of those positions were restored, we would need to factor that into our projected costs for the coming year. A couple other important factors to keep in mind going into the next fiscal year and into your fee setting deliberations. One is that just as a normal part of our process, we do evaluate as we get into the past the end of the current fiscal year. We evaluate what our current year total expenditures were in each fund and identify what savings might have occurred, and then those funds then can roll over and be part of the starting fund balance for the next fiscal year. And then more of those savings that carry over, then the less pressure there is on fee increases. So we will be continuing to evaluate that as we close out the end of the fiscal year over the next week plus. And then, of course, we also continually update our revenue projections, both in current year based on actual expenditure or actual revenues received and remitted to us by our collection agency, CDTFA. And then we also update our projections for next year based on both current revenue projections and our projections of the number of fee payers in the coming year. So we'll be continuing to update those over the next month as well. And then lastly, I'll just remind the committee that a unique thing with HWCA is we do have the total $40 million loan that needs to be repaid to the Beverage Container Recycling Fund. This is a loan that was provided to keep HWCA solvent when we first identified that there was a significant structural deficit in 2022-23. Our plan continues to be to repay about half of that in the current fiscal year and the other half in the coming fiscal year, and we're on track to be able to do that. I'm happy to report. So with that, next slide, I believe that is our final slide of the presentation. I'm happy to turn it back to you, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much, Director. Thank you, CFO Brown. So we'll now turn it over for Tashina here to lead us through public comments, and then we will have board Q&A immediately following that.
Thank you, Chair Rakestraw. The floor is now open for public comment for this agenda item, the DTSC Leadership Report. I will turn to our in-person participants. If there are any folks in the room that would like to comment, please make your way to the podium. You may go ahead. Okay. Hi, I'll start over. Good morning, Ivana Castellanos with Physicians for Social Responsibility, Los Angeles. I don't have anything prepared, so I'll just sort of walk through some observations from the presentation. And I just sort of want to note some of talking about the emergency response. I think that it's very important to note that there is a direct link between the work that's happening at DTSC and in this room and some of these facilities, even when there isn't direct DTSC oversight.
of the facilities. I'm thinking about the work in the hazardous waste management plan and the report, the hazardous waste criteria and management requirements. Those all have implications for any facilities that that have hazardous waste. And so I think I just say that to really ground us in the importance of the work that we're doing, and yeah, to think about these emergencies when we're doing some of the work that might seem administrative. And I also want to note on the SB 673 track 2, we have submitted a comment letter requesting an extension to the 15-day comment period. 15 days is just a really difficult amount of time to engage community members, community-based organizations. And so we've requested an extension to a 45-day comment period, particularly given the range of the different areas where there has been revision. So we're hopeful, and we've submitted that comment letter, that we'll be able to have a little bit more time to provide more direct feedback on that. And regarding the enforcement accomplishments, I would be interested in maybe getting access or having a copy of some of those materials. I think enforcement is an area where it would be really helpful to have more transparency and clarity into what that looks like on the ground. Because as we were thinking about the metrics for enforcement, there was kind of this these questions around, like, what does quality look like in enforcement? And so I think to the degree that there can be information that's available, not just internal trainings, but also to have community members be able to understand what enforcement looks like, to understand what happens at these inspections, I think that would be very useful. And also, I know it's a like oversimplified graphic, but just looking at the enforcement policy, and I know it's specific to site mitigation, but I will say sort of the circle, it is reflective of, I think, what a lot of communities feel regarding enforcement is that it feels like we're just going round and round and round, and the outcome doesn't really change. And I think there is a difference between how DTSC views the goal as being a return to compliance. And I think communities have a different understanding of the goal being prioritizing their health. And
Start with your comment.
like a settlement doesn't necessarily provide the relief to the community that they're looking for. And so that there maybe should be other outlets. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Are there any additional in-room comments for public for this agenda item? Seeing none in person. Zoom participants, please raise your virtual hands if you wish to comment on this item. Parents Against SSFL, I'm sending you a request to unmute. You may go ahead.
Jenny Knack from Passful. We very much appreciate the efforts made by DTSC and the firefighters on the ground regarding the Sandy fire response in attempts to keep the fire from the SSFL official parcel boundary, especially as the fire was closely approaching Area 4, the area primarily housing the nuclear research and development activities. However, the implication that no SSFL contamination was dispersed in the fire is not scientifically founded. Documented migration of contamination from the SSFL off-site is well established. DTSC denies this fact, and the assumption that that SSFL contamination is neatly and safely contained was implied in the director's update. This is why that we understand that the reason why that is constantly said in SSFL public meetings is to reduce, DTSC liability, and we understand that off-site contamination that came from SSFL will not be pursuant to cleanup enforced by DTSC. We understand that that's not happening, but that does not mean that contamination that has been migrating off-site for decades was not dispersed in this fire or previous fires. So I think it is a dangerous public-facing message. The assurance is implied. And I think that that's dangerous for community members. Regarding the monitoring, DOE will not currently release their data their radiation monitoring data that was collected. So yes, we're going to do a FOIA. But I think the director's update implied, monitoring is being done. And I think the implication is, okay, there's transparency and that the public is receiving this data. We are not receiving the data. And DOE has stated to communities requesting that data that they will not be handing over the raw data. They will handle it after DOE does whatever they're going to do with it. And the time frame for communities to receive this amended data has not been set. So I think improvements have been made, and I'm not at all suggesting that the agency and local firefighters did not make, real heroic efforts. I think that very much is the case, but there are still issues with the communication and how it's framed in terms of public exposure to contamination that's could be dispersed from SSFL during local fires that approach the perimeter. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Melissa Bumstead, I'm sending you a request to unmute.
Good morning. I'm Melissa Bumstead with Parents Against Santa Susana Field Lab, and I live on the Los Angeles side of the hill. And during the Sandy fire, we were watching very closely and watching the wind direction, which is actually unusual for that area, coming from the west to the east every evening, threatening to blow the fire directly into Area 4, which is the radioactive portion of the site. And then my family would have been directly downwind. So we were preparing to evacuate. We were trying to, with the limited data that we had, make informed decisions. I just want to personally thank Deputy Director Than Berg for reaching out one evening to let me know that they were taking emergency actions. I thought that was just very helpful. And I knew she was very busy dealing with the emergency to take the time to let us know that DTSC was aware of the situation. It was appreciated, and I just want to recognize that. The thing that I would have liked to have seen were public statements from the DTSC about their involvement with the fire. One thing we continue to highly urge the DTSC to do is to more publicly recognize the threat that the site holds to the community. For decades, the DTSC has told the community there is no threat, minimize the impacts of the pollution and how it can reach the community and the health impacts it can cause. So we saw action that was great, but especially as there were news outlets following the story, we had huge public interest. Very, very many people were concerned, the Sandy fire reaching the SSFL, that direct communication about the real risks of the site would have been appreciated. And we're hoping to see when Boeing's final CMS is, the final draft comes through the DTSC, which should be due any day, that they push back on Boeing's claims that there is no offsite pathway, exposure pathway, which they made that very clear in their report, which is blatantly false. Also, too, I forgot to make, because I hadn't had all my coffee yet, I forgot to make a statement during the public statement, and I don't know if there's a way to address a non-agendized item, if it's possible to just say that I'm highly concerned about the Rose Watershed Foundation grant in partnership with DTSC that says any organization that criticizes the DTSC or a statement of the DTSC is not allowed to apply for this public grant. I find that very much like censorship, and I find that very concerning, and I would like the BES to take another look into that and see if that's really a democratic way of going about providing grants to environmental justice communities like mine. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Rebecca Overmeyer Velasquez, I'm sending you a request to unmute.
Hi, good morning again, board. This is Rebecca Overmeyer Velasquez, Clean Air Coalition of North Whittier and Avocado Heights. I just have a couple of points in response to Director Butler's report. First, regarding the track 2 SB 673 revisions to the rulemaking that came out November, and then just more recently came out a week ago with a 2-week turnaround for public comments on the latest draft. We and other organizations have sent the DTSC a letter requesting an extension of that time period for public comments to give us more time to look at what is actually a quite significantly revised version of the rules that we saw from what we saw earlier this year. So we need some time to really respond properly. It's been, as the director said, many, many years in the making, and we believe this is not the time to rush the process if we want to get this right. So we're asking for more time, and I would hope that Director Butler will weigh in and give us more time to respond properly. That's the first thing. And the second thing about lead attribution, I just want to clarify for the board, this is not a new issue. Lead attribution has been something that has been done for many, many years. The CAC was actually in conversation with the Geological Society years ago, before the pandemic. We hosted engineers and chemists here who took samples in the community around us and told us then that it was pretty easy to do a fingerprinting lead attribution study if they just could get dust from the bag houses and the WESP from Ecobat. So this is at a moment when we were asking for a fingerprint study to be done as part of the lead testing, the soil sampling around the facility years ago. And actually, Phil Chandler, when he was writing that plan, had included as part of the study of the soils around the facility, he had included a study of lead attribution. That was voted out by Quimeco. Quimeco decided that they didn't want to do that, and so the DTSC just agreed. So we don't have lead attribution for the facility because of that decision by Quimeco and then by the DTSC. And we know that this could have been done, so it's a great shame that we don't have this knowledge now, because we could have had it years ago. I'm glad we're on the path now to getting this knowledge, but I want to just let the board know some of the history and the frustration of the community when we hear that finally things are getting done that we asked for many, many years ago. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Last call for public comments on this agenda item. Seeing no more hands on Zoom, our Spanish interpreters have already informed me that there are no comments in the Spanish room, so that concludes this public comment period.
Thank you very much, Hina. So now, board members, this is your opportunity to ask questions and have discussion amongst this board. So who would like to kick us off? Vice Chair, please.
Thank you, Director Butler, for your update and for the progress realized, particularly in the pace of permitting. I have a question for Deputy Director Brown on the budget matter. I'm just needing a little bit of clarity as we go into the summertime fee setting process. Are we looking at going forward in the new fiscal year, a metal shredder facilities account, a hazardous waste facilities account, and a hazardous waste control account in addition to TSCA? Are those all separate categories, or is any one of those nested under another?
Apparently, they'll all be independent funds in the Budget Act.
And will the board be in a position, other than on the metal shredder facilities account, of trying to set fees appropriate to the remaining accounts?
Yeah, so the metal shredder facility account, the fee on metal shredder facilities is set through regulations by DTSC. So the other three accounts, the primary revenue sources are the environmental fee, facility fee, and generation and handling fee. Those all continue to be set annually by the board.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vice Chair. Who else would like to go? Member Atkins, please.
Thank you. I would also like to ask Deputy Director Brown a question about budget. And thank you for the report. It was helpful. I may have been given this information before, but as it stands now and the status of budget conversations between the legislature and the governor, what resources specifically are in the budget for CVCI communities? Are there new funds or just, and what current funds are available? Do you know, or can you get that to me?
Yeah, so TSC had been the amount of funding provided for CVCI has changed over the year as there have been various budget revisions. Originally in SB 158, DTSC was provided $500 million due to various budget constraints that has been reduced. And we had been slated to receive $42 million in the 26-27 fiscal year, this coming fiscal year, from the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. However, that was removed as part of last year's budget negotiations. So as of right now, we are not budgeted to receive any new CVCI funds going forward.
Okay, thank you. Can I ask one second question? And I think I was part of an Exide tour. Thank you, DTSC, for arranging that a week ago. Funds for Exide moving forward, assuming what are those funds available right now?
Yeah, so the January budget proposal included another $70 million each in 26-27 and 27-28 fiscal year. So a total of $140 million over the next 2 years to continue with the residential cleanup program.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Member Brostrom, please.
I had a couple of questions for Director Butler and a couple of questions on the budget, but I'll start with the emergency response. So I had a couple questions on the emergency response. One actually was brought up in the public comment that I also had in terms of sharing information on the air monitoring and how that information is being shared, whether it's being shared and whether it's going to be posted on EnviroStore or just how is information shared from the monitoring to the public?
Yeah, so I agreed with the comments that while operationally on the ground, we took the right steps. We could have done a better job communicating information in real time. And then it sounds like we need to get to the bottom of why this data is not being published. So I need to look into that with the team because my preference would be that it's shared transparently.
Thank you. And then, thankfully it sounds, like some of the worst fears were not realized in that. But I did have a question about, if the outcome was different, and if those air monitors did show elevated levels, was there a plan in place? Is this something that we should be preemptively thinking about, for in the future?
Yeah, thank you for that. And, dovetails with Ms. Castellanos' comments about every day administratively being cognizant of being prepared, having contingency plans, preventing these things from hitting that worst case scenario. So right after this happened, our team has been dusting off the contingency plans that are in place for the responsible parties are required to have contingency plans. Mm-hmm. So we're reevaluating, looking at those now.
And I think you had, it's been sobering to see that, like, kind of the number of emergencies, particularly in LA recently. And I think you had mentioned, calls for the need to maybe strengthen emergency response capabilities. Do you have a sense on what those needs might be? Is it additional staffing? Is it other types of resources or plans in terms of scaling up our emergency response at DTSC?
Yeah, it would be to establish a standalone emergency response program. Okay. Their departments and agencies have. Right now, our emergency response program is nestled as really a branch in our hazardous waste program. And so now that and inexperience just over this last couple years at DTSC, I'm seeing that, emergency response touches every part of our department, not just hazardous waste program where emergency response is currently located. So it would be, kind of pulling it out of that program, having a standalone emergency response program department-wide.
And is this something that's actually in progress, or this is like a kind of a future-looking hope?
We're working closely with Cal EPA right now to come up with a cohesive vision for the state. So in progress.
And then lastly on this item is more of a request, which is, at the BES, I think we received information on these, quite a bit after the fact. And, wondering if there's a way that we can be alerted real time when these emergency responses are happening.
Yeah, thank you for pointing that out. I would like to have a better just kind of mechanism or channel that we do trigger in that case so that board members are getting real-time information, because I know you all are also receiving questions, most likely, and concerns from members of the public, interested parties. So Swati, maybe that's something that, our chief of staff, Grant, can work with you and your team to kind of create that process so information's flowing more readily to board members in these instances.
Thank you. The next line of questioning I have is on the West Oakland Collaborative. And similar to Exide, I'm always looking for moving from ad hoc, kind of configurations, and where things are working well, how can we move from one-offs to institutionalizing models. And so I'm hearing that this is something that has worked well. Is this a replicable model? What are those conditions that you think would, be amenable to this type of collaborative? And I think we'd want to support that.
Yeah, thank you for raising that, because the West Oakland Collaborative does have a formal memorandum of understanding that's signed by all the chairs, including US EPA, Cal EPA, the departments involved. And I credit Miss Margaret and others in that community for developing that model and implementing it here. So yeah, we can look for opportunities on how to formalize that maybe in other spaces. It's a great idea.
And then I think my other questions are more on the budget. Okay, sorry. So about the budget, I was a little maybe I should know this, but the hazardous waste facilities account, what does that fund?
Yeah, so the hazardous waste facilities account is our primary funding for our permitting division. So any activities related to oversight of permitted facilities, and so it's funded primarily by the facility fee as well as the permitting fee for service.
Okay. So I saw for the emergency response resources that there was quite a bit of funding shifted from general fund to TSCA, or from TSCA, I should say. I'm just wondering the rationale for that. And I mean, to me, this might mean, less funding is available for site remediation. And to me, it does seem like it would be a better fit for general fund as something that is really impacting the public.
Yeah, it's a good question. So the proposal is to take the $4.3 million that had been funding emergency response from general fund, and instead it will be funded from TSCA. So our total, and this does not reduce the amount of funding we have in TSCA for other purposes. Instead, what it will do is our total TSCA appropriation will be increased by $4.3 million. Accordingly, what that does mean is that the amount of revenue that needs to be taken into TSCA in order to support that total appropriation will need to be $4.3 million higher each year going forward than it would otherwise be. But the total amount
Okay.
of funding we would have available for all of our funds would remain the same.
Okay, and this may be better suited for the fee setting team, but would that mean raising fees? Is that kind of the
Potentially.
implication here?
Yeah, ultimately, it does mean that the TSCA appropriation level that has to be supported by all of our revenues, including fee revenues, would be $4 million higher than otherwise.
And then on the next slide, I'm just a little confused about these numbers. It says TSCA it says 15.1 million, and HWCA, is a negative 783,000. I'm having trouble understanding these figures. Is this meaning that we're in deficit or surplus?
No, and I'm sorry if that was unclear. What I was intending to show there is for each of those funds, what's the change in appropriation level associated with all of the budget proposals. So for TSCA, all of the budget proposals that we had in January and the spring in total, our projected costs in the budget year would be $15 million higher than they were in the current year. And then for HWCA, HWFA get a little bit convoluted because you have HWFA having been a sub-account of HWCA. But in aggregate, our total appropriation level, our total spending level budgeted for next year will be about $800,000 lower next year than it is in the current year. Again, largely because we have a bunch of costs that had previously been budgeted for metal shredder oversight that are either being reduced or shifted to the new metal shredder account. So they will no longer need to be funded from HWCA/FA. Those reduction in costs were then offset by a few of the other budget proposals we had that largely offset those decreases. So for example, we have one of our January proposals is to increase funding for the environmental chemistry lab so that we have a replacement funding for all of the equipment that we use to support our programs in the field. That an additional $1 million from HWCA to support a purchase of additional equipment. So that offsets that reduction from the metal shredder shift.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Member Brostrom. Member Williams.
Thank you. I appreciate bringing the emergency response portion of this up, and I'll try not to take us too far down the rabbit hole on it. But the data transparency piece which Member Brostrom raised and from public comment as well, hugely important. I can probably diagnose right here what I think is some of the challenges there, but I would welcome if the team could look into it, namely that typically when there's an emergency, it's great that you can now get air monitors out there. It usually takes 4 or 5 days to decide whose website the data is going to go on. Whether it's, with the Cooper or whether it's nestled somewhere else, it's as simple as that sometimes. And I've seen that and experienced that a number of times. I think the experience from the fires in Los Angeles in January last year really spoke to how important getting that data available publicly as soon as possible is in addition to all the other stresses on the public of potential disaster impact in their lives like that, but also taking one off the table to the extent that it's accurate is hugely important. So I would sort of encourage perhaps the solution to it and sort of welcome feedback or report out between now and the next meeting is just to pre-establish who is going to host data for incidents. So rather than going around in circles of does it go on the unified command gets together and there's 8 different agencies of all varying different levels of government trying to decide who's going to host the website. Just standardize it rather than making it up for every single incident. It was so pleasing to hear that the air monitoring was deployed in advance. I don't recall that was not always the case. In fact, thinking of the Woolsey fire, which did move through SSFL, that wasn't the case, and I think it to took a cabinet level decision to actually move that. So I really appreciate that that is now happening. As you're looking through this contingency planning, I would suggest and welcome feedback is to look at, well, what actually is the capacity for DTSC or even Emergency Support Function 10, which I think this nestles under Cal EPA as the lead, to be able to deploy the level of coverage that would be needed in a catastrophic event. Do we have enough resources to do that? What does a regional air quality management district have? Have we identified where they sit in order to call on it? I remember, PSPS, for example, and trying to understand from the telephone companies, where their cellular on wheels were, and often we found that they were in Nevada, and they only had one for the entire Western district. So being able to plan those out in advance, because I imagine, particularly in the case of Southern California with a catastrophic event that is more than an isolated fire, but for example, worst case scenario, earthquake. Do we have enough resources to cover an area like Southern California in particular, where land use planning and local decision making around land use planning has so closely entwined industrial chemical facilities with residential areas, and will we have the resources available, and do we know where they are in such a scenario? So I'd welcome that as part of the contingency planning discussion, and sort of working broadly with the Cal EPA umbrella of all the different assets that all the various agencies, state and local, can bring to the table. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll certainly bring that back to discussions with Cal EPA. Thank you for those points.
Thanks very much, Member Williams. From my side, I have a couple comments and a couple questions. The first is, I guess, congratulations on getting the Button Willow final permit out. I think if I understand correctly, there's only one long-standing permit that is left to be released or finalized, which is the Kettleman permit. And at that point, the department will turn a new page, at least on the timeliness of permitting. So I think that's a big step. The second comment is to really lift up what Member Brostrom was saying on using the West Oakland Collaborative as a model and exploring that as a model for other facilities or sites across California. It seems to have been such a big success, and to know if it is replicable in the absence of a Miss Margaret out there. My questions are, I guess, first, and some of these you can take back. You don't have to respond now. We heard from one commenter about the Rose Foundation grant. It includes some provision on no criticism of DTSC. Be good to know if that's kind of what's there on that, if that's in fact the case, and if it is, that seems to be a bit troubling. The second question, and maybe Deputy Director Christensen is on the line, would be good to know about, so now that microplastics is finalized as a candidate chemical, is the next 3-year priority product work plan anticipated to include any products where you would regulate or potentially regulate microplastics?
Yeah, thank you for the question. This was just the first step. We are committed to having a science-driven approach to analyzing products that contain or generate microplastics. And we do anticipate that there may be products in the next work plan which would fall into that category.
Thanks so much. And then I guess my last question is on the lead attribution. Appreciate there's a long history there. Appreciate your commitment to it. I noticed that in your director's priorities, it's characterized as lead attribution for site cleanup. So I was wondering if there's a kind of a next step or a corresponding focus on the permitting side as well, of using those same resources to apply to permitting.
Yeah, so the model and research from this endeavor will be applied across the department. And it's housed right now in our site mitigation program as leading the charge for the importance of this. But what we've done in the last year is pull in folks from our laboratory and enforcement in particular to stay abreast of anticipated research that we can take advantage of across the department. So I will make a note for permitting folks to also engage in that if they're not already. But I view it as a department-wide benefit for all of our work.
Great, thank you so much. That's all from me. I know EO Sharma had a question as well.
I had a quick question for Deputy Christensen, if she's still on. Great. So congratulations. This is great to see all the updates on SCP. And as you all know, we've been working very closely with the SCP team on metrics. So we're excited to share that out in the next few months. I had a question about the cleaning products containing hydrofluoric acid. I realize that this is the first time that DTSC has used the authority of SB 502, where you don't necessarily have to rely on manufacturers' alternative analysis. And if there's enough data out there, you can utilize 502. What triggers that? Or if you can help us understand how that decision making is made versus, utilizing 502 versus going through the full reg process. That would be helpful, and happy to have further conversations if it's a longer conversation about this.
It is very likely a longer conversation, and I will say this is the very first product, as you point out, and so we will be reevaluating our approach to see whether it warrants any changes moving forward. But for this first product in particular, we worked with our Green Ribbon Science panel to identify some factors that we felt were important to take into consideration, and that was the clear availability of alternatives, considering the size of the market and considering the scope of the potential for harm. And so those factors, when taken into consideration, really did support our action on this step. And we will continue to evaluate how well this works and whether there are other applications that may also need to be taken under consideration by SCP.
Great, thank you.
Thank you very much. I think that concludes this agenda item. Let me consult with our EO for a sec to see what we should do next.
In the meantime, just wanted to share a quick update that there was a technical issue when we started the meeting this morning. So I would like to state for the record that the meeting was called to order at 9 a.m. with all board members present and a quorum established.
Okay, so the plan right now, so we had tabled one kind of sub aspect of the EO report yesterday. I think we're going to go ahead and pass over that, so table that for the next meeting. We do have a next meeting very shortly after this one. I don't think there's too many substantive updates that haven't otherwise been covered in our discussion in the last day. So I think just to save a little bit of time, go ahead and table that item. So if board members are okay blowing through a break, I think we'll go ahead and turn to Deputy Director Bain and move to item number 4, which is the Hazardous Waste Management Report and Plan Update. So Deputy Director Bain, thank you so much for joining us, and we look forward to your presentation.
Great, thank you, Chair Rakestraw. Good morning, board members and colleagues and public. So as you all know, we released the draft 2026 Hazardous Waste Management Report in May. This is an update of the data presented in the first report from 2023. DTSC is mandated to produce an updated report every 3 years, and that's on an alternating cycle with the Hazardous Waste Management Plan update that is also every 3 years. In today's presentation, I will be summarizing the report and also talking about plan implementation. Okay, thanks. Got it. Okay, so to be more specific, first I'm going to review some key takeaways and some of the data from the 2026 report. Then I'll go over the 2 workshops we held last week and the next steps for finalizing the report. Finally, I'll talk about implementation of the 2025 plan and the next steps in our planning processes. Next slide. Okay, so first we're going to start with some data regarding hazardous waste generation in California. Since 2000, the average annual amount of manifested hazardous waste generated in California has decreased from about 2.5 million tons to about 1.5 million tons. And this includes both RCRA and non-RCRA waste in this data. So as a refresher, when identifying hazardous waste, California's program is more stringent and broader in scope than the federal program. So hazardous waste identified due to the federal criteria is referred to as RCRA, while waste identified as hazardous only by California criteria is called non-RCRA. So this data of the 2.5 million tons down to 1.5 million tons includes both RCRA and non-RCRA. Next slide, please. If we dig a little deeper into the data, about 20% of the hazardous waste generated in California is RCRA. That's the darker blue portion of the bar. And about 80% of the total hazardous waste generated since 2019 is non-RCRA hazardous waste. That's the light blue portion there. Next slide. To provide some context around the RCRA quantity, here's a box plot of the top 20 generating states based on US EPA's 2023 biennial report. So these boxes are organized by percentage of total RCRA hazardous waste. So the bigger the box, the higher the percentage generated in that state. California ranked 15th nationwide for generation of RCRA waste, despite being the most populous state in the country. We make up less than 1% of all RCRA hazardous waste generated nationwide. Next slide. Finally, digging even deeper into our top manifested waste streams. The top 3 manifested hazardous waste streams remain the same as in the previous report. That is soil, which is California Waste Code 611, other inorganic solid waste, California Waste Code 181, and waste and mixed oil, which is California Waste Code 221. And then all other hazardous waste is represented by the blue box on top. Soil is consistently the #1 waste stream and accounts for between 1/4 to 1/2 of total manifested hazardous waste, varying across each year. So between 1/4 and 1/2 of the total manifested waste is soil. This waste stream is generated from construction type projects as well as site mitigation cleanup efforts. Next slide. So moving away from the data on hazardous waste generation a bit, here is information on the number of RCRA permitted facilities in California. We see that the number of facilities has decreased, and we anticipate that the number will continue to decrease. So to be clear, this is the number. This number reflects only treatment, storage, and disposal facilities that have a full DTSC RCRA permit. There are also other facilities that operate under different authorizations or lower tier permits like household hazardous waste collection facilities. But here we just wanted to highlight the top tier permitted facilities. Next slide, please. Next, we have data on universal waste. So universal wastes are hazardous wastes that were determined to pose a lower immediate risk to people in the environment compared to other hazardous waste, and they're widely produced by households and many different types of businesses. There's 8 different categories, but just highlighting a few here. Overall, around 85,000 tons of universal waste were handled in California in 2024. That is about an 8% increase over what was handled in 2021. And in both 21 and 24, electronic devices were the biggest portion, the top type of universal waste collected in both of those years. So the biggest change in generation proportionally is from our PV modules, that's photovoltaic modules, AKA solar panels. And compared to 2021, the tonnage of photovoltaic modules collected in 2024 increased 400%. Finally, lithium-ion batteries from electric cars, as we've discussed, are a rapidly increasing waste stream, with hundreds of thousands of them expected to reach end of life in the coming decades. In the next decade, and continue to increase. Okay, so now we're going to move from the data updates portion of the report into more topic-specific research updates that were also included. Next slide. The first goal of the 2025 Hazardous Waste Management Plan is source reduction and also diversion from incineration and landfilling. Source reduction refers to actions taken prior to the generation of hazardous waste that reduce the amount or the hazardous characteristics of the waste. For this report, DTSC analyzed source reduction reports, affectionately known as SB14 reports, from the top 15 generators of combustible solvent waste to analyze their solvent source reduction efforts. This is solvent waste that is sent off-site to a combustor for management, and combustors include incinerators. Waste reduction efforts were attempted by all 15 generators. Some measures are unique to specific processes, while others are more widely applicable, like administrative controls. An estimated 4,320 tons of hazardous waste was reduced due to successful source reduction measures over the 4-year reporting period. However, generators also noted many challenges to source reduction. Next slide. In the report, DTSC provides an update on our efforts related to hazardous waste criteria evaluation. The ignitability and reactivity criteria contain outdated test methods and cross-references. Consistent with the recommendations identified in the 2025 Hazardous Waste Management Plan, DTSC is developing draft proposals for pre-regulatory input prior to formally initiating rulemaking. Next, we have the corrosivity tests, the corrosivity characteristic. So the steel corrosivity test has been codified in federal regulations with a specific method and defined procedures. In California, however, we still rely on a guidance document, and we need to determine if a codified test method is needed. In addition, that federal test is only applied to liquids, but in California, we also consider solids for the corrosivity characteristic. So if we were to apply that test method in California, we would have to develop a method specifically for solids as well. And then finally, further evaluation of the toxicity characteristic, which is the most complex and distinctive criterion under California law, is ongoing. DTSC has begun to gather background information for leachability tests used for hazardous waste identification and other applications from other states and countries. We're looking at the analytical test methods and key test components like the extraction duration, and how tests are applied within regulatory frameworks, how waste management decisions are based on analytical results. In the report, we present information on test methods used in other states and countries in a lovely table for everyone to look at. Next slide. Okay, let's move on to a discussion of the report workshops and next steps for the report. Next slide. So we held 2 workshops on June 16th and June 18th. We wanted to offer one workshop in the evening to accommodate people who can only join us after work. So that was our Tuesday evening from 6 to 8 p.m. workshop. We had 18 attendees. And on the Thursday morning, June 18th, we had 32 attendees at that workshop. We appreciate everyone who was able to attend our workshops, and we really look forward to their feedback. We received some great suggestions that can be implemented before publishing the final report, such as the incorporation of an acronyms list. We also received feedback to incorporate a glossary of terms, and we're considering how to do this. A complicating factor is that the terms we use have regulatory definitions, so it gets really complicated if we oversimplify those. So we might include a glossary in the report, or we might try to find another way to provide that information, like maybe something on our website. We also received some great questions at the workshops. In particular, we received a question regarding DTSC's current criteria evaluation work. We wanted to highlight that right now, DTSC's toxicity criteria work is an information gathering exercise to understand what test methods other states and countries use to make their waste management decisions.
We are hoping that this research can lead to recommendations in the next planning cycle. Let's see, we want to encourage everyone to continue submitting feedback this month and continue engaging with us going forward. Next slide. So we have the feedback period, which opened May 5th when we released the draft report, and we're asking for feedback to be submitted by July 6th. And this QR code will take you to the feedback forum. And once feedback and comments are considered, the report will be finalized and published with, we're hoping to have that done this summer, by the end of the summer. Next slide. So to close out this presentation, we'll be discussing plan implementation and next steps. Next slide, please. All right, so we're focusing on a few priorities, as you can see here on this slide, as we head into the next fiscal year starting July 1st. Some of this work has already started and will likely continue beyond this coming fiscal year 26-27. You see the priorities here, and I'll be going into more detail on these in the following slides. Next slide. As I mentioned earlier, goal 1 of the 2025 plan is to reduce hazardous waste generation and divert hazardous waste away from incineration or landfilling. This year, the Hazardous Waste Management Plan Unit sought expert advice from the Green Ribbon Science Panel, or GRASP, at their meeting in April regarding how to think about setting goals for hazardous waste reduction. The discussion at the GRASP meeting largely focused on hazard reduction, not volume reduction, which makes sense given a major tenet of the Safer Consumer Products program is to reduce hazards. Volume reduction initiatives may make sense where there's an opportunity to collaborate with specific sectors and stakeholders, such as retail hazardous waste, pesticides, solvents in certain sectors, or perhaps household hazardous waste. However, large-scale volumetric reduction is likely to be very challenging, as pointed out in the comments of the GRASP members during that session. Next slide. We will continue to review the selected SB 14 source reduction reports and engage with generators to learn more about the successes and challenges they faced. This will allow us to better understand how DTSC might be able to encourage source reduction with our generators. We'll also continue to seek outside expert advice, such as with the Green Ribbon Science Panel, as well as continue to collaborate with Safer Consumer Products. Next slide. On hazardous waste recycling opportunities, DTSC has been working with the Interstate Technology and Regulatory Council, ITRC, to understand and develop management strategies for batteries. The ITRC subgroup is working on a guidance document for management of lithium-ion batteries that's anticipated to be completed later this year. ITRC has invited DTSC's subject matter experts and other regulators to review draft guidance. DTSC will share the guidance once it becomes publicly available. DTSC has also been analyzing the growth of lithium-ion batteries and projections to estimate how many large format lithium batteries may come into the waste stream over the coming years. DTSC has begun to reach out to other states to better understand successes and challenges they are facing with battery management, and is having more discussions with other California state and local agencies and facilities like household hazardous waste operators. Next slide. We recognize there's a lot of interest in researching treatment opportunities. For instance, bioremediation of geothermal and lithium waste was suggested during the last planning cycle. DTSC is beginning to work on understanding the technical processes for this type of project and the current regulatory requirements that may apply. We will also continue to work with the Community Considerate Cleanups Group, which has already published its first quick reference guide. You can link to it with this QR code, and is currently working on publishing a quick reference guide specifically for excavation. You can find, as I said, that first guide through the QR code there. Next slide. Finally, we're working on a dedicated webpage for sharing out progress on the plan's goals and recommendations. And we're looking at designs that can serve as a landing page, not only for our work at DTSC, but also around, our work at DTSC around planning, but also connecting people to the work led by, for example, community considerate cleanups, ITRC, and other groups that we've worked with. We're hoping that webpage can be launched this summer. So please feel free to sign up for our e-list to get updates on hazardous waste management plan activities, or email us at the email here on the slide. That's the end of the presentation. Thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you very much, Deputy Director. So Sheena, will you please go ahead and open it up for public comment? And then after that point, we will have board Q&A and discussion.
Thank you, Chair Rakestraw. The floor is now open for public comment regarding this agenda item. Are there any in-person comments?
Thank you, Ivana Castellanos, Physicians for Social Responsibility. Again, on the hazardous waste management report, I'm still reviewing it, so I'm hopeful to have more detailed comments to send your way soon. But I did want to share a few things today, and I think first of all, I think there's an issue with the e-list. So I have been trying to be on this e-list like over the past year. I've signed up like 5 times. I've confirmed emails, and I did not receive the notification for the report or the workshop. So I think there might be an issue. All to say, if you're someone that follows these things, maybe don't rely on the e-list, check the website, and then to the board, to the degree that there are key things that you think folks need to be aware of, it might be helpful to add the board list as well. And hopefully that gets resolved soon. Okay, now to the report itself. I would say my main criticism that I want to share today is just how disconnected it feels from the plan itself. I think it would be very helpful to try to identify those connections, note how this data is relevant to the related goals and recommendations, and to just have more of the relationship between the report and the plan be apparent as you're reading the report. I think that would really be helpful for folks to synthesize the information with what they know about the plan. And so I think that's one of the main things that I would share. And I also, I shared this during the workshop, but I think a glossary would also be very helpful for key terms, particularly for folks that aren't from a toxicology background, that might need, as they're reading through, a refresher on what certain terms mean. I think that would improve the ability for folks to engage with the report. And then I will also say that I think in several places, the data is reported with very limited discussion and analysis or interpretation. And I think it's kind of difficult sometimes as the reader you're reading it and you're like, okay, so what does this mean? Like, so what? Like, what does this mean? How is this relevant to the plan? And so like, even sometimes it'll make references to, oh, like there were challenges due to other factors as well. Like, what other factors? So I think that's on, I think probably when I provide more detailed comment, maybe I can point out where some of those sections are. And I think the source reduction section in particular, the tone did feel a little defensive. So I don't know if there's a way to adjust some of the language that's used. On the conversation of sort of metrics and volume, I'm in agreement that hazard reduction is a very important goal. I don't think that necessarily means that we shouldn't be trying to track volume as well, because I think that's related to other goals that we have related to managing capacity and reducing exposures. And I think in terms of the leachability, as the analysis moves forward, I'd really like to understand, based off some of the other tests and other places, which ones, for example, have an ability to measure kind of the impact of the waste.
Please wrap up your comment.
The TCLP is really focused on kind of measuring specific chemical concentrations in leachate samples rather than the impact to aquatic environments or to people. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any additional in-person comments at this time? Seeing none in person, those on Zoom. If anyone would like to comment on this agenda item, please raise your virtual hand. Parents. Parents against, I'm sending you a request to unmute.
Hi, this is
You
Jenny
may go
Knack.
ahead.
Hi, this is Jenny Knack again, and I too am still working through the
Parents
plan.
against, you may go ahead.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Hi, this is Jenny Knack. Can you hear me? I can't hear you. I am unmuted. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Oh, great. Okay. I too am also still working through the plan, and I think part of the working through the report. And I just want to say that I think part of my issues with digesting the report leads back to the issues that people across the state mentioned with the lack of the plan in the plan. I think because there isn't a clear plan with established goals and very discrete metrics, the report itself is a bit all over the place. I'm also concerned about data that is not included in the report. So for instance, they're talking about, amounts of unmanifested waste, making assumptions about how much of it there is, while admitting in a footnote that omits Los Angeles and Orange County waste, which are two of the three top generating counties. So even this report is, I don't even know what the word is to use, because you're trying to understand what the report is and it is not complete. So the report isn't complete, and it was our opinion that the plan also wasn't a complete plan. One of the things that is jumping out to me at my very rudimentary stage of reviewing this plan is, there's a somewhat disingenuous claim of, it's hard to track manifested waste because so many things are unmanifested, but that is by design. Cal Matters covered this story last March. DTSC and the rulemaking are creating more pathways for unmanifested waste. So we can't complain that we don't know what is happening with hazardous waste when we are creating more exemptions and exceptions for things to be considered unmanifested. I'm also concerned, and I know I repeat this ad nauseum, and I don't want to apologize, but I'm tired of hearing myself saying it. I am concerned that we are moving things towards a classification of not hazardous, but that does not mean they are any less toxic or impactful to public health. So if we put the same constituent in we remove it from the hazardous waste stream and it goes to a municipal site, we're recording it as a successful metric potentially of, reducing volume or, reducing this pathway, but it still is in existence and it still has the potential to impact people. And that is the frame that I'm reading this through very carefully. And I know it's probably too late to request an extension, but if any of the board members are trying to wade through this report, maybe you might have some compassion on my plea to give more time, because it is a bit of a rough read if you're really trying to do your homework. Thank you.
Thank you. Last call for public comments on this agenda item for those on Zoom. Seeing no other hands raised, Spanish interpreters, please let me know if there are any comments in the Spanish room. No comments in the Spanish room. Chair Rakestraw, that concludes this public comment period.
Thanks so much, Sheena, and thank you to the members of the public who commented. So now, board members, this is your opportunity to engage in a discussion and ask any questions of the department. So who would like to kick us off?
just have a comment.
Yeah.
I would encourage folks to watch the workshop. I know many of us did. I found it very informative. I believe the recording's online. So encourage folks to check out the workshop. I thought it was really well done. So compliments to the team.
Thanks so much, Eo Sharma. Member Brostrom.
I just had maybe one comment, I guess. And something that I've been kind of wrapping my head around is that I know in the last report and in this one, there's information on the decrease of the number of facilities over time. I also see that there is a decrease in hazardous waste. And I wonder how much of that is like in relationship to each other. Are we seeing the reduction in facilities because we're also seeing a decrease in the amount of hazardous waste in California? So that's kind of a question that I have. And then my other note, and I think I've already shared this with DTSC, is to me, the more important information is not the number of hazardous waste facilities, but how much capacity is at those facilities. And I do appreciate, there was more information on that regarding the landfills. And I understand also that landfills have a very discrete amount of capacity, like, the once it's filled, it's full. And that with recycling, it's a little bit more, there's like more rollover turnover. But I'm just struggling, because so much is made of capacity in the state that I don't feel like I yet have a solid understanding of like what is the magnitude of the problem. And so those are, I think I've already shared with DTSC, but that's kind of what I think about.
Please, go ahead.
Yeah, just I wanted to say on the relationship between the smaller number of facilities and the reduction in hazardous waste. I'll defer to the team if we have a more technical answer, but the hazardous waste that's generated could be treated, stored, or disposed out of state, right? So I'm not sure that there's an exact correlation, but I don't know if we've done any research to be more specific about that. So, well, I can check in though with the team.
Yeah, please go ahead, Vice Chair.
Just to follow up to my colleague's question and comment is, I think that the reduction in the number of facilities also plays into our summertime fee setting process, because as several facilities, fewer are going to be paying the facility fee and the permitting for service fee, which I'm mischaracterizing slightly, but those two fees, that factors into the calculations that both DTSC from a budgetary point of view and the board from a fee setting point of view will be considering. So it's hard for us to know at this stage whether that, the closure of various hazardous waste management units, the reduction in the number of refineries that have those hazardous waste management units and other such facilities over time. I don't know what that portends as we get into fee setting just over a year hence, but I do think that a fewer number are going to be paying than we have had here to date. And I'm not quite sure how that will play out this summer, but something for us to be mindful.
Thank you very much, Vice Chair. Seeing no other requests, I'll go ahead and make a couple comments and a question or two. So similar to what Eo Sharma said, so I think I was one of the, I think you said 18 attendees at the first workshop. I thought it was very useful. I thought it was really well done. A lot of like detailed information was presented by the team. So really commend your team for taking the time to do that and engage the public. I know I really appreciated it. I also appreciate the update that you're planning a web page with more detail on the plan implementation. I know subcommittee looks forward to working with you on that and finding a way to both provide as much information as possible, recognizing, of course, the uncertainty of staffing levels and so on. I wanted to, it's funny, Member Brostrom's line of of questions was exactly what I had written down as well. So I wanted to ask kind of some variant of it. I guess my first question is, one of the requirements in the report is to include information on waste that will be generated in the future. And maybe I missed that in the report, but is that something that is in there or is planned to be included in there? And if you don't have the answer now, that's fine. I can also talk about it later. And then also kind of building off of what Member Brostrom had said with regards to capacity, I similarly have kind of really been spending a lot of time looking through the plan and the report and all of that, and keep coming back to exactly this issue, which is like goes to recommendation 1.6 in the plan that we approved last year, which says that DTSC will create a work group to evaluate the state's capacity for hazardous waste management at all levels of the hierarchy, and continuing on. And I noticed that that was not included in the plan implementation next steps. And to me, at least, kind of conceptually, this is like the key midterm question for the state, which is like, should the legislature, for example, or the governor, whoever, be concerned that we don't have the capacity in the mid and long term to effectively manage hazardous waste in this state? And I know a lot of the focus on the plan implementation has been on kind of like the concrete regulatory, near term next steps. But I want us to kind of really be mindful of the need to plan for that future, for the mid and long term, to make sure that we're taking decisions that sufficiently far in advance to effectively plan. So just wanted to flag that. And again, happy to follow up offline there. And I think that is all I have. Member Atkins, Member Williams, do you have any? Okay. I think that concludes our presentation for that. Thank you so much, Deputy Director. Really appreciate the detailed presentation there. So I think we're just about done for the day. We are now on to agenda item number 5, which is the review of action items. So I'll ask our Vice Chair to please review the actions from yesterday and today's meeting. If you're ready, please, over to you.
Thank you, Chair Rakestraw and board members. I urge you to offer corrections. I'll work with our executive officer and our ombuds on the notes from this, just to make sure that what we post online is accurate. Other than the usual things that you will see in our online summary, which is when we established a quorum and when we took a break, the formal actions that the board took are as follows. With regard to agenda item 3 yesterday, the initial order for ECOBAT, the board moved to accept the amended staff recommendation, and it passed 4 in support with an abstention. Secondly, agenda item 4, the board moved to approve the executive officer's execution of 2 contracts that support the board's hybrid meetings, as detailed in our online materials, and this passed 5-0. The board moved to adopt the minutes from our most recent April 27th and 28th meeting, 5-0. Today, other than establishing the quorum and in follow-up to the director's leadership report, our ombuds would have captured a number of the follow-up requests for information that had been articulated by board members and our chair. And you will see those both posted online and in our July meeting. Those are the action items I have. Do board members have anything I may have missed or want to correct?
I can just add that we have 2 requests from Member Brostrom. One was asking DTSC to share information about air monitoring as well as emergency response. So that's something that I will connect with Grant on, what does that communication look like? Also a request from Member Brostrom for more of a specific question around, are we seeing a decrease in hazardous waste facilities because of the decrease in hazardous waste? Lauren will connect with you to make sure that we captured that correctly. We also had one request from Member Williams about, does DTSC have enough resources to cover emergency response, especially in Southern California? So it seems like we'll connect again with Director about that. And we did have, let's see, 5 requests from the public that our ombuds will be connecting directly with the members of the public and getting answers to their questions as well. I think that captures.
The chair had questions regarding the Rose Foundation comment. I believe the Rose Foundation regards supplemental environmental project funding. The chair had a question about microplastic regulation and how products may be in the future affected by that. And a final question regarding the lead attribution work underway. Board Member Atkins had a question about the CBCI budget remaining and the funding available for Exide, which Deputy Director Brown responded to, but there may still be a balance available in CBCI to fully respond to that question. Lastly, I think Board Member Brostrom, and no doubt a sentiment I would say shared by all, is the notion that as the state responds to various environmental emergencies, that we set up through you, our executive officer, more real-time communication.
Thanks. And I think I had a couple other ones on the most recent item, but I trust that Lauren and team will capture those in reviewing the meeting recording. Okay, so I think that we don't need to take any action on that item, do we? Nope. Okay, so I think that concludes just about this meeting. So I would like to thank first all of you, DTSC staff and the members of the public who have taken the time to join us both in person and online. I'd like to really thank our board staff and the facilitation team who do such an enormous amount of work behind the scenes to make this all run so seamlessly. And I'd like to also thank DTSC for hosting us here at the Cypress office. And of course, our board members for taking the time and for spending so much time preparing for these meetings and bringing such a thoughtful perspective. So our next meeting is very soon after this one. It's on July 23rd in Sacramento. You can find more details on the agenda and so on, either online now or shortly will be posted. So with that, can I have a motion to adjourn? Second. We have a motion and a second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. The meeting is officially adjourned at 11:22 a.m.